And then we can. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to today's webinar titled Peer Online Course Review Rubric Listening Session. My name is Dr. Anwar Hijaz, and I'm a political scientist faculty member at Saddleback College and also a faculty mentor at the CVC at One. I'm so excited for today's webinar, but before we get started, I want to share a few announcements. So during the webinar, we will be sharing out a survey link. We really appreciate if you can fill out the survey. This will provide feedback for CVC at One to allow them to improve for future programming. So please take a few minutes. It is a short survey, but really appreciate if you can fill it out. And then also, while At One provides badges for course completion, we do not offer badges for attending this webinar. However, if your institution requires proof of attendance for flex credit or professional development, please stay until the end, complete the survey, and request a copy of your responses to be sent via the Google form. With that being said, I will go ahead and pass this along to Sochi and Marilena.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. My name is Sochi Tirado. I am a DE coordinator at Imperial Valley College, and I'm also a faculty mentor at CVC. I've been in education since 1999 and started in K-12, transitioned to higher ed. I don't even remember what year, but I have been a DE coordinator. This is my 9th year as DE coordinator and a few years with CVC as well. It's great to be here.
Hello, my name is Maria Elena Fernandez, and I am the DE and Instructional Design Coordinator at College of the Siskiyous and a CVC faculty mentor. I started teaching at community college in 1989, before we even had computers. Nah, we had them. They were just big and bulky. Anyway, so I have been involved in distance ed since 2002, and I'm just very excited to be part of this work and have been with CVC as a faculty mentor for about a year and a half now, helping Sochi out and doing this really exciting work. I'm super excited about it. Glad to be here.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our session. Okay, so this is the agenda. We're going to go over what's been going on with the rubric revision. We're going to focus on some key areas, look at the overall broader modifications that are currently being worked on, talk about the statewide impact, and then get some Q&A from you, have some time for Q&A. So you're welcome, though, to drop your questions in, as Anwar mentioned, in the Q&A. We're happy to pause at any time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with a little bit of background of what's been going on with the rubric revision and bring you up to date, and then also talk about what's going to happen in the upcoming months with this rubric revision that we're working on. So back it was probably in the fall, a year ago, the Chancellor's office approached us, CVC, and said, you know what, we want you guys to look into revising the rubric and bringing it up to date. So CVC formed a group of faculty, administrators, instructional designers from across the state, and we created a work group. So the work group has been meeting. We started meeting in February. So last semester, and we met till June. We were doing bi-weekly meetings, and during those meetings, we were looking at what the Chancellor's office directed us to update, as well as other changes that, the group felt that the rubric needed. So those meetings happened last semester. Last semester is when we did a lot of the work in making updates to the language, updates to the rubric. So that is still in draft form. After June, around OTC 2025, we had our first listening session And then we started having other listening sessions, taking what we've done so far with the rubric on the road, so to speak. So presenting little bits and pieces. Some of the groups that we did is we did DECO at OTC. We also had a session at OTC. We've had one of our work group participants or members go to present at ASCCC. They're actually the representative for ASCCC in that rubric revision group. So then after that, this semester, actually this month, we started the rubric pilot group. So what we did there is we gathered 32 POCR reviewers from across the state, and we're having them look at the rubric in its draft form and review a course. We actually are having them, we divided them into two groups. One group is reviewing a course that has never been POCR aligned. Another group is reviewing a course that is already badged, currently badged within, I think, the last 2 years it was badged. And the goal behind each of those work groups is to get feedback on the draft language that we have so far. And also that group that's looking at the badged course, they are looking to see what needs to be done so that a badged course will retain its badge. So we're going to create a crosswalk along with guidelines of what to do with already badged courses moving forward. So we're going to take that information that we gained from the work group. We're going to take it back to the original work group and make modifications to the rubric. This month, we're also going to meet with a group of reviewers, and we're going to talk about Section 0. Section 0 is a new piece of the rubric that we're going to talk about later on in this presentation, but that work group is going to focus on Section 0. And then and there's more. So as I mentioned, that data that we get from the group that is working right now to look at the rubric, we're going to take it, we're going to analyze it, gather it, and then we're going to call back on that original work group. And that's what we're calling phase 2. So we're hoping to meet with that work group starting in December and moving on to next semester to make revisions on the draft language based on what that group found. Was the language not clear? Does it need to be modified? Are there pieces that don't make any sense? Things like that. And then next semester, well, actually this is happening already right now. As CVC, we are working on resource development. So we're looking at what resources we need to create for reviewers as well as for course authors. We're looking at our current @ONE courses and what needs to be modified, particularly our POCR training course. That one will be modified, as well as online teaching and design, the 12-week course. There will be some modifications there because that course is currently created based on our current rubric. So modifications will need to be made on that. And we're also looking to see what other resources need to be created so that when the rubric is released, everybody feels supported to get courses either reviewed or create courses that are aligned to the rubric. The plan is for the rubric as well as the resources to be released in OTC 2026, and then implementation would begin fall of 2026. Any questions on that information? No, we're good. Okay. Let's see.
Okay.
That's yours.
So
right?
I will. Is there any questions? That's great. You were super clear, Sochi. Okay, so moving on, the purpose of the updates, it's probably pretty clear to anyone who's been reviewing courses or to POCR leads that it was time for some sort of update. The last course design update was in 2020. And so when the Chancellor's office wanted or approached the CVC, they had 4 specific areas that they wanted to see sort of into the rubric, or they wanted to see infused. And the first was some sort of section or element on artificial intelligence, a section or an element on regular and substantive interaction, information about privacy and security, and also equity-focused practices. So the overall goal of this revision process going forward is to implement more frequent review and revision of the rubric. As we know, the online environment changes so quickly, and it's important and imperative that that our rubric reflects those changes, but also supports faculty to create the kind of environment that our students will feel supported and engaged in. So that's the purpose of the updates. Moving to the next slide. So the first point that I would like to talk about briefly was AI integration. And when in the overall design of the rubric, it was clear that some sections were going to be sort of brand new. They had not been they hadn't been a part of the rubric before. So we created, the work group created 1.3 artificial intelligence. And I think what's important to note here is that the CVC is not providing a position or guidance on how course authors or colleges should implement CVC. That is not the goal here. The goal here is to encourage the course-specific guidelines that instructors would create within their courses, and to have that clearly stated someplace. So you can see that 1.3 says a course-specific AI policy for both the instructor and the students is clearly stated, easy to find in multiple places, and includes clear expectations for how AI may or may not be used in the course. This is draft language, so it's not, that's what's getting reviewed in the pilot this month. So we may find that works. We may find that it needs to be more explicit. We're not sure yet. So I'm looking forward to reviewing those pilot results. And again, the goal here is to encourage the course author to really develop those course-specific guidelines for students. One thing that I wanted to say that the work group was really focused on was thinking about the rubric from the student perspective. What are we trying to create? What's the ultimate goal for the student by the time they're aligned? So the resources for this that we're thinking about or developing would be the revised course design rubric resources course, which is a working title. There's nothing yet there. Existing CVC and DAT1 training courses and webinars, those will always be resources, and they'll be refreshed and renewed as needed. And the ASCCC AI resources that our representative was really generous in sort of pointing those out to us and making sure that we were all aware of what's already there. So this is an important one, I think, and I think will be fairly straightforward, hopefully. And so we'll go on to the next slide, unless anybody has any questions.
I think we have a question. So, Say, do you want to unmute yourself?
I don't think they're able to unmute. So if he wants to type in the question in the chat or in the Q&A, I might be able to unmute them individually.
Okay. I wasn't seeing a question in
I see their hand up. That's why I was.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I just allowed them to talk, so they should be able to.
Oh, I see.
Say, I'm not sure if you have a question. Maybe that hand is up by mistake. All right, well, feel free to type it in the chat.
Oh, she says
okay.
by mistake. Okay, all right, next slide.
So we'll go to the next slide. The next section that we were tasked with looking at was regular and substantive interaction. We know that the original language was regular effective contact. We knew that needed to be updated. We also knew, we were also aware of the ACCJC's requirements for regular and substantive interaction and their rubric. So we were trying to remain mindful of all of these sort of influences upon this. And so in section 3 of the rubric, there are specific sections that are just been sort of reworked to reflect new language, but also maybe more of a student-centered, more of a student focus. So we have the initial course contact in 3.1. We have the instructor-initiated interaction in 3.2. We have student-initiated interaction in 3.3, and we have the facilitation of student interaction in 3.4. The goal here was basically to keep us in alignment with the ACCJC requirements, but also just thinking about the student experience. We wanted to ensure that there was meaningful instructor-student engagement. So this really doesn't reflect any sort of new focus from the old rubric, but it's just packaged and put in a different place. And we also wanted to make sure that RSI was embedded across existing elements. We didn't want to necessarily create a new, there was no need to create anything new here. So we just improved and embedded the language, hopefully. And the resources here would be, again, that POCR course design rubric resources and existing CVC @1 RSI training courses and webinars. So that's regular and substantive interaction. Any questions here about that?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay, then let's go to the next point that we were asked to look at and
All right. So
infuse.
before we move on from RSI, I do want to say that for both AI and RSI, we did look, closely at what we have right now. So as Marilena mentioned, for RSI, that the ACCJC rubric, we had it, the work group had it right there. We were looking at it, seeing what the current rubric already has that aligns to that. So I would say language modifications was most of the RSI changes because we did have most of, the ways to design a course thinking about RSI. And we had long discussions about the difference between our course design rubric versus the ACCJC RSI rubric, because they serve two different purposes. Anyway, I just wanted to make that clarification and just make sure that everyone understands that, we were looking very closely at the things that already exist. Like with AI, there is that ASCCC, information. So we were looking at that as we were designing and revising language. I see another hand up. Kate, I don't know if there's a question. Oh, I see one in Q&A from Kate. Could you say a little more about if the goal of meaningful is a change and what this will look like? Okay, maybe we just answered it, she says. Ensuring meaningful instructors.
Yeah, again, I don't, I just wanted to say that all of us in the work group were really conscious of not putting any specifics or hard and fast, you must have 3 interactions or you must have, that is very campus specific, but also course authors. And Garrick, if you have anything you want to add to that, you can, but we were very conscious of not, what's the word? I don't want to say overstep, but not to put any parameters on things, but to really keep course authors and local colleges at the forefront of that decision process.
Yeah, Maria Elena, well said. The only piece I would add is some of that is also discipline specific. And so the POCR committee did a really good job balancing that because as we know, the rubric is set to really be a tool for any discipline, but we know there's discipline specific content that runs differently. Just naturally, it happens differently in a course. And so this was one of those areas where it's hard to lock it down with a whole bunch of different nuances to it. So therefore, we kind of backed up a little bit to that 30,000 foot level and said, well, meaningful instructor-student engagement, because there's so many specifics to that depending on the discipline. And so that's kind of where we went with this one, was just kind of taking a step back and saying, how does this apply to your discipline? And that could look very differently. And so therefore, the language needs to be all encompassing.
Thanks, Garrick. Appreciate that.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next point.
All right.
So the next big piece that that we were asked to include in the rubric is data and security. You know, some information about security, privacy, you know, things like that. We were given, so by the Chancellor's office, we were given a directive to revise the rubric, and they gave us these specific pieces they wanted to see. And the ones that we're presenting on, AI, RSI, security and privacy, those are the pieces that we were directed by the Chancellor to modify or add in the rubric. But we're not given guidance as to how to do it, you know, so the work group did a lot of we had a lot of discussion about, like, okay, what does this mean to online learners, to online faculty? So for this one, this is a brand new piece. The align language, the draft language is the course links to institutional privacy and security policies and provides students with guidance on safe technology use and protecting their data when using course-related tools or platforms. So this, like AI, is something that as CVC, we're not saying this is exactly how you do it. We're just saying the course needs to have information for the learner. And those of you that are well versed in course design and review, usually we have a module, module 0, or the orientation module. Everybody calls it something different. This is where we're seeing this piece would live. It would be informational for the student. There is language tied to the institution, but the institution decides how they're going to, hopefully they've already decided what policy they have. So it's just pointing to that policy and making students aware that that exists and that we are, you know, taking their privacy into account, which, you know, I know we all do in different ways when we adopt tools, when we link students out to, you know, different platforms and things like that. So again, the goal is transparent communication of policies, aligning with state and federal regulations, and protecting our students' security, and to promote safety. So the biggest resource that we'll have for this as CVC is that revised course design rubric Canvas course that we're redesigning, and we're working on a title still, as you can see. But that's what we have. Any questions on this one? This one, I feel like it's pretty, it's pretty straightforward from a rubric perspective. There will be more conversation in your college for this, of course, but the rubric language is pretty straightforward. As a reviewer, it's pretty straightforward. As a course designer, hopefully also pretty straightforward. But of course, it's that, you know, looking at your college and what does your college have? No questions? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on. So the next element that we that is, we could say, brand new, kind of, it's equity. We were directed to add equity language in the rubric, and this was kind of, you know, again, just given to us with kind of like you guys decide what you do with this. I know a lot of colleges had created like a section E for equity and use the Peralta rubric as a guide to create this section, but we were either all doing our own thing or not doing nothing at all. In my college, we haven't really addressed equity in the rubric, but I know that some colleges have gone and included a new section or new pieces in the rubric to fill this equity piece that we hadn't, looked at as CBC. So what the group decided to do, again, lots of conversations. We talked about like, should it be a new section? Should we infuse it within the already existing language? And what the work group decided to do is that infusing it throughout the rubric made the most sense. So to give you an example of what this looks like, Marilyn and I just picked one of the sections from the draft language, and the phrases in bold are what the group interprets as this would be the equity language that is infused. So in this example, it's 2.5. It's called Canvas Tools and Apps. And here, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see like reduce barriers, support different learning needs, provide equitable access. So that is the language that we use to fill that equity gap that we were missing in our current rubric. And there's a lot more language like this sprinkled throughout. So just adding language to make sure that we're representing our students and that we are very, very deliberately thinking of equity as we're designing our courses. So the goal here is center equity in course design to support success for all students, infuse and or amplify equity principles throughout the rubric. I feel like we had some pieces of this already, but we just made it more evident. You're going to see language that is much more evident that we are intentionally looking at equity in our course design. Incorporate and build upon the foundational work of the Peralta Equity Rubric. So again, the work group, we had that Peralta Equity Rubric when we were working on this. We went through the whole thing and made sure that we were hitting every one of those pieces in our new rubric design. Resources for this, of course, that POCR course design rubric will have information on how to build those things into a course and how to review them. And then CBC at One, we have so many RSI trainings, webinars. We've had a lot on RSI. We will continue to have those, the at One courses that we offer. Our goal is to continue to adapt those, revise those as, things change and as we learn more about RSI.
And actually, and what we mean is equity. Sorry, because RSI was the previous screen.
Sorry.
I know.
Yes, thank
We've
you.
had 25 eyes on these slides and still we missed that one. So yes, we do have excellent existing equity training courses and webinars that we will be utilizing there.
Yes, thank you. All right, any questions? Okay, then we will move on to our next slide. And I think that one's still mine, right? Yes, it is. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we were given this directed by the Chancellor, and the Chancellor's office said, these are the things that we want to see, brought into the CVC course design rubric, which were the first things that the work group did. But then we sat and we thought like, okay, what else needs to be revised in the rubric? We're already having this conversation. Let's look at it. Let's look at it a little bit further and see what it is that we can improve upon, because We've learned so much about course design, about teaching online, and I think that this revision, because of everything we know, the things that you're going to see in this revised rubric hopefully will make sense and will be like, ah, yes, that is the piece that we've been missing. That's what we hope. So anyhow, other things that we did, an overview of that. We did make some structural updates. So instead of having sections A, B, C, D, we've changed to numbers, just to, make sure that it's enough of a difference that we don't get confused. Like, what rubric am I on? Am I on the 2020 version or the 2026 version? Because it'll be 2026 by the time it's released. So we did change from letters to numbers. We did rebrand performance levels for clarity. So we have not aligned, approaching alignment, aligned, and exceptional. So instead of exemplary, we've changed to exceptional. I do want to make a note on the approaching alignment. That is going to be in the rubric. However, if your college decides that, you know what, we really don't like it, it doesn't make things clearer, it actually makes things more confusing, that is an optional criterion that your college can decide to be like, nope, we just want, the three main ones, which are exceptional, aligned, not aligned. We had a lot of conversations about this and, should we include this or not? The bottom line is that what we all want as reviewers and course designers and course authors, we want the element to be aligned. That's the bottom line. But of course, having all of these other, things are important and are necessary. But aligned is, that's the baseline. That's the bare minimum of what we want to see in courses. Alignment with evolving educational environment. So, the Chancellor's office did give us that directive, but we did make some modifications in language where, again, because we know everything we know now, it makes sense to make these changes. The rating criteria language, we made it focus on the student experience. So you'll see a little bit of change in the way that those elements are written. And then we're still working on this, but we do want to get away from the PDF document because it's been a struggle for so many of us to get our comments in that PDF, make additions. So we're looking to see how we can transition, just how, where the rubric lives. Some sort of web-based design is going to happen. We haven't, we're still talking about how we're going to do that, but we do know that we want to get away from the PDF. Any questions? Okay, then we will go ahead and go on.
Okay. So this is the million-dollar question. What happened to section D? Well, I don't think it's new. The requirement to have an accessible course has always been in place, but there are more, I guess the word is evident. There are more evident guidelines now, state and federal rules that are requiring all digital content to meet the UDL and accessibility standards. And recently, as some of you may know, Title V, a course outline of record updates now require UDL considerations within the course outline of record. So I think it's pretty evident that accessibility and universal design for learning is critical to the foundation of a course. So as a group, we were talking about all this, and we just thought it's been such a challenge. It's a challenge for people to do it at the end. They do a review and then all of a sudden they would hit section D and that would be at the end. So moving it out of the rubric itself, which is a final a final product anyway, we decided that we would address them in a section 0, which we'll talk about in a second. So moving into the next slide. Section 0 prepares the course to be review ready. So in this section D, the vision is that the course authors will complete a backward design document used to refine the content first, and then also to help them identify the accessibility issues, universal design for learning considerations, create remediation plans. This is all prior to a formal review, to an actual course review. So that section 0 is it's kind of a prerequisite, or the vision is to have it occur before a course goes to review. Doesn't mean that you can't review a course, but the vision here is to have all of the documentation in place that you would and be in progress, and you could begin the course peer online course review while the accessibility fixes are underway. However, as we explained before a course can be badged, the identified accessibility issues have to be resolved. So even though a course has a plan, has done some preliminary work, and it's in review, in order to get final badging, it would have to have completed all of the issues or resolved them in section 0 before getting the final badge. So I think I think that the vision here was what we've been hearing, all of us in the work group had been hearing in the field for so long, and that is the sort of the tragic events of an instructor going through a review and then sort of at the very end going, I can't do this. I can't do the accessibility portion. Just can't do it. Never mind. Bye. And so they leave, or they're discouraged, or there's something in the process that wasn't supporting them in ways that we felt could be happening, and that other colleges were sort of already flipping that model anyway. I mean, we heard it from the field that people were flipping the model to do this, to support their course authors. And so we wanted to make sure that we thought about that as well. So that's, if you go to the next slide, we'll do the next slide. So the goals in our work group, after lots of conversation, the ultimate goal here is, if you want to be specific, it's compliance, right? We need to meet those federal and state requirements before a course can be badged. But the other goal here, and I think this is what the work group really felt, was that we really want to empower our faculty and encourage them to develop these sustainable accessibility practices. There are tools system-wide. There are amazing resources within campuses. There are statewide sources. There's a lot of support for faculty, and we need to sort of front load that so that our course authors will come in feeling confident and ready to go, and that their course will sort of just fly through that review because it's had a good hard look in section 0. So we are, as Sochi mentioned earlier, the section 0 work group will meet hopefully this month to sort of begin talking about what that looks like. Section 0 resources are under development, so we're excited about that, and hopefully we'll be able to share that with all of you come OTC time.
All right.
Any questions on this?
I see a question about what are the names of the different sections. So I'll just read those off. Section 0 is readiness, and this is all draft still, you guys. So
Yeah,
section 1, policies and support. Section 2, course structure. Section 3, regular and substantive interaction. And section 4 is assessments. So that's what we have now. And then we have another question, or maybe, okay, Mark just adding that they did some sort of pre-review form at their college. Yeah. Okay, so now we are all done presenting. now it's, we have plenty of time for questions. So if you guys have a question, drop it into the Q&A or the chat. I'm looking at both of those and we'll be happy to answer. Okay, so Cynthia's saying about the short timeline between OTC and fall.
What was the question?
Cynthia
comment?
says the time between OTC and fall implementation is quite short. It would be helpful to have the draft even as it's going into phase 2. And then there's another question about getting a copy of the latest draft rubric just for discussion. I'm going to let Garrick answer those questions about getting a draft.
Yeah, happy to. So, a couple things that the work group talked about regarding this topic was we were worried to release a draft. Number one, the pilot group is testing it right now during the month of October. And so, if we release that, the draft early, we already can guarantee that it's going to be outdated by the end of October because we fully expect the pilot group to come back with modifications needed because they're currently testing it. That includes a crosswalk between the old rubric and the new rubric to make sure that is a smooth transition for everybody involved. So we didn't want to release it early for those reasons. That being said, to Cynthia's comment regarding OTC and fall implementation, that short timeline, we are going to do our darndest to speed that up as much as possible. That includes building as many front-end resources as possible for POCR reviewers, for faculty going through the POCR process, for the crosswalk between the old rubric and the new rubric. So we're working as quickly as we can on that. At the same time, the work group is really being cautious of rushing anything. So we don't want to release things too early because we do expect modifications to take place. So however much, and I've answered this question privately in the chat as well, however much we want to be able to give a draft today and say, here's the rubric, go forth, review as much as you can. As we have things solidified, we will absolutely share them out. But until we have them solidified, we don't want multiple different versions of Google Docs floating amongst the ether, and then people have to rescale that once we do release the official document because they say, oh, shoot, I already went forth and designed a chatbot that does X, Y, and Z. And now it doesn't work because you modified section 0 or section 1. And so we're doing our best as we can to make sure we kind of balance that ebb and flow for releasing as much information as possible, but not releasing it too early and then having everyone need to reshuffle their deck as we move forward. So I promise we hear that loud and clear, and the work group is well aware of it, and we are doing our absolute best to try to balance that as much as we can. So that's a very long answer of saying we won't release it today, but we are trying our best. So I really appreciate you all understanding that.
And then I just want to reiterate that, I talked about a few work groups. So the original work group is the work group that did the revisions, together with, and I don't have the list in front of me, but we had representatives truly from all across the state. We made sure that we had representation from all across our state. But we had people from DECO, ASCCC, we had administrators, we had POCR leads, DE coordinators. So it was a robust group of people in that work group. And they are the ones that, we would meet every other week and make the draft changes. It started with the directive from the chancellor, and then it trickled down to like, okay, with our combined experience and what we know about course design, and we've been working with the rubric for this long, what are some other changes that are needed? Things that don't make sense anymore, things that have always been very confusing that we can clarify. So that's how we did that. Even like the section 0, like removing section D accessibility and making that section 0 readiness. That came from our collective experience of, the struggle with accessibility. And then the fact that now accessibility is a requirement. So it's, if you've been a DE coordinator or a POCR lead for a long time, you've probably said, accessibility is not a DE problem. It is a campus-wide problem. And maybe you haven't been heard, because I definitely haven't been heard. Well, now it truly is. Now by law, it is. So that's what, that section 0 came, that's how it came. So I'll answer the next question. What about recertification for POCR? So recertification for POCR, so for reviewers, that's something else that we're going to work on. It's going to be part of getting the final version of the language of the rubric and looking at the training, because that POCR training is going to be revised. But then we are also going to say, okay, this is, if you're already a POCR reviewer, these are the things that you need to do. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but a little while ago, we added POCR training turned from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. And if you were already trained, you had to complete one module that focused on accessibility. What we're envisioning is something like that, where you don't do the entire training if you're already a POCR reviewer, but you're going to complete, this one module that, shows you what the changes are, things like that. So that's what we're envisioning. We're still working on that. And those are the things that we want to get done, so that when we do release the rubric, it's like we release everything as a package. Here's the rubric, here's the resources, here's the training. Okay, will there be a special course for people already certified in the past rather than yeah, so same question. All right. Any other questions in the chat? Okay, I think there are no other questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Sochi and Marilena. I'm going to just share a few final announcements. And of course, if anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meantime, thank you so much, everyone, for attending the webinar. Please check the chat for the survey link. I'm going to drop it right now. And also, let me click on every, sorry about that. So please fill out the survey. It'll only take a few minutes, and it really assesses the CVC at one to create programming that better suits the needs of the system. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@cvc.edu. You can also use the survey as proof of attendance with the copy of the survey that you receive in your email. We also encourage you to explore our other webinars that we'll be offering throughout the term. I will drop the link for future webinars in the chat. Let me do that right now. So there's the link for our future webinars, and also our current and past webinars have been posted, the recordings, and the recording of this webinar will also be posted on our webinar webpage. Please just provide a few days for that to happen. But thank you again, everyone, so much for attending, and we'll stick around for a few minutes. I do see one more question that just came in.
I see it, Honora. I can answer that.
All right,
so
wonderful.
The question is, plan for previously OEI review quality badged courses. So that's one of the things that the current pilot group is looking at, where they're actually looking at a course that already is badged and what needs to be done so that the new pieces of the rubric are added to that course and it can be, rebadged. So what CVC is planning to do is release some sort of, checklist that, if a course is already badged, these are the things that the instructor will have to do to so I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat because I saw a long message come in. These are the things that the instructor has to do so that they can retain that badge. So that is in our mind, and we're working towards getting something so that it's easy for both the course designer or the course author as well as the reviewer to look at. So some sort of a checklist is what we're envisioning. Anything else in the chat?
Thank you all so much. I hope everyone, there are a few comments coming in.
I see I see your message in the chat. I will send you an email off the webinar regarding that.
All right, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.